members of the community here in support. We are going to go first with Pastora Vicky, who's going to lead us in a prayer before we start the press conference.
Muchas gracias a todos. Vamos a empezar con una oración.
We're going to start with a prayer.
Y primero que todo quiero recordarles a todos los que están presentes
I want to remind everyone who's present today
algunas de las cosas que la palabra de Dios nos dice.
some words that God teaches us.
Y una de ellas está en el libro de Éxodo 22.
And one of them is on Exodus 22.
Y dice, y al extranjero no engañarás ni angustiarás, porque extranjeros fuisteis vosotros en la tierra de Egipto.
Exodus 22, do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were a foreigner in Egypt.
Y en el libro de Deuteronomio 10 dice, mostrad pues amor al extranjero, porque vosotros fuisteis extranjeros en la tierra de Egipto.
And then in Deuteronomy 10, therefore show love to the foreigner, for you were foreigners in the land of Egypt.
Y uno más que es en Deuteronomio dice, y entonces mandé a vuestros jueces diciendo, oír entre vuestros hermanos y juzgad justamente entre el hombre y su hermana y el extranjero.
And Deuteronomy, then I command your judges at the time, saying, hear the cases between your brethren, and judge righteously between a man and his brother, or the stranger who is with him.
Y diciendo eso, quiero recordarles
And saying this, I want to remind you
que como una nación cuya institución y fundación fue establecida bajo la declaración que en Dios nosotros confiamos,
and as a nation whose institution and foundation was established under declaration that we trust in God,
hoy venimos ante este juzgado orando por cada representante y persona envuelta en este caso para que Dios nos use como abogados y jueces para tener la suficiente sabiduría que honre y represente los valores cristianos de esta nación en los que fuimos establecidos y en los cuales hemos creído.
we come before this court today praying for every representative and person involved in this case, that God may use us as lawyers and judges to have sufficient wisdom to honor and represent the Christian values in which we were established and which we have believed.
Y así yo les invito a que todos oremos para que sea Dios guiándonos a ser jueces justos y esa justicia sea ejercida sin ignorar el amor, la compasión y la misericordia y sobre todo la gracia a la que Dios nos llama a ser representantes.
And I invite you all to pray that God will guide us to be just judges, and that justice will be exercised without ignoring love, compassion, mercy, and above all, the grace to which God calls us to be representatives.
Vamos a orar.
Let us pray.
De acuerdo a Mateo 25, dice que nosotros debemos de tener compasión con los extranjeros.
Matthew 25, that you must have compassion to strangers.
Y oremos de esta manera. Padre amoroso Dios, Hijo y Espíritu Santo, venimos ante tú hoy reconociendo tu gracia, tu misericordia para todos los presentes, creyendo que de alguna manera todos te hemos fallado. Sí, Señor, de alguna manera todos te hemos fallado. De alguna manera todos hemos quebrado la justicia. De alguna manera todos hemos quebrantado la ley. Pero en tu infinita gracia y misericordia nos perdonas 7 veces 7. Eso es lo que dice tu palabra. Todos los que aquí estamos reunidos como tú lo pediste, unidos en tu nombre y con un solo propósito: venimos creyendo y declarando que tú serás el juez superior en este caso. Tú eres el juez principal. Te pedimos que guíes y uses a los jueces para que actúen con justicia. Te pedimos que les des sabiduría y que les des la gracia que ellos necesitan. Concede la sabiduría a tus gobernantes y líderes estatales para que puedan ver la verdad en cada caso que se les presente. Dios, que tu voluntad se haga aquí en la tierra como es hecha en el cielo. Dales a Jeanette y a su familia la paz que necesitan durante este proceso. Señor, nos has dicho que la batalla no es nuestra. Tú has dicho que la batalla no es nuestra, sino que debemos entregártela a ti y tú lucharás por nosotros. Padre amado, déjanos a cada persona involucrada en esta decisión, dejamos a cada persona involucrada en estas decisiones y creemos que tú te glorificarás a través de esta decisión. En Cristo Jesús nosotros confiamos. Amén. Si quieres.
Yes, we will leave it there. She did a prayer asking for her case to be tried justly, and for her family to have peace during this process, and that we really want to give this battle up to the Lord, and really guide in this decision what will happen.
Amen.
Gracias, thank you. Next, we will have Luna and Roberto, the children of Jeanette Vizguerra, share a few words.
Hello. Today, my mom went ahead and had a hearing. And as far as kind of very huge action updates, I would say at this time, things will be done with a timely manner. This is something that will go ahead and take some time. At this time, I would probably go ahead and say that as far as kind of as a community, what I would keep recommending is just keep attending the rallies, vigils. We will also go ahead and be organizing other events externally from that. A lot of the people in that detention center, they will also go ahead, or we've seen some families start coming forward, as well as my mom is taking testimonies and getting to learn a bit more about the injustices in that center. At this time, we just need to remain hopeful. This is something that will go ahead and be done, hopefully with the correct manner that it's supposed to happen. And hopefully she comes home. It might just take a little bit longer. That's all I have for right now. I'm gonna pass it on to my brother, and then if you guys have questions.
With the question-wise, as it begins to take longer and longer, how much stress is there on the family right now as you watch this process?
Well, I would say when it comes to stress, obviously it affects you in different factors, whether that be financially, emotionally. We are very blessed to have the community that we have. I would say these stresses include, for example, like child pickups, child drop-offs. We've found some ways to arrange that, as well as financially. My family, we are continuing to work at this time. So as long as it's a little bit hard to live your day-to-day process while still having to kind of manage things like in this scenario, it's still something I would say we're figuring out.
Any questions?
Can you guys tell me how you feel about the argument that your mom's freedom of speech is being violated?
So, from what I saw in the court, it's that she's trying to speak out. She went to all these protests. She went and tried to help all these people, and that's specifically why they targeted her, because she was out there. She was out there talking. She was, pushing against all these problems. And I think that's why, you know, that problem was brought up, that, you know, it was violating her First Amendment, because she should have the right to go out there and talk about, you know, problems that need to be talked about without being targeted, you know, ambushed and taken away.
For more in specific legal questions, we do have Laura here. So,
My turn.
yeah.
You're gonna be a lawyer, though, right? You're like,
Are you able to step up a little bit more? There you go. You can just step up there. There you go.
all right.
Thank
Hi,
you.
my name is Laura Lichter. I am one of the attorneys that's involved in this case. We're also accompanied by my partner, Mark Barr, and Brian Green. Por fin te atrapamos. Those are the words that were told to Jeanette when she was being arrested after being ambushed in the parking lot at Target. Finally, we got you. Now, that may be the sexy thing that gets all of you here today. But in the context of what's going on in immigration enforcement, as we've seen over the last several weeks, speech, conduct, being involved in protests, saying things that might not be popular, seem to be the kind of thing that gets the attention of the authorities in enforcement. Now, that's not the only argument in this case. It's the one that became more and more apparent after we were able to do more and more investigation in this case. Jeanette was arrested during a lunch break on Monday. I got a call from the detention center, and when I heard a voice, I said something you guys can't all film. And then literally overnight, we filed 2 different lawsuits and started the process with the agency that if they were actually going to try to remove her, that they couldn't without making sure that she could be safely removed to a country where we believe she would be harmed. What's wrong with what ICE is doing here is much more than a technicality. It's not a paperwork violation. They literally just didn't get the order right. We're in federal court right now because her detention, we believe, is illegal. If you're going to take somebody and put them into custody, you have to have a basis for it. They say they have an order. We say they have a defective piece of paper, and they can wave it around all they want, but it doesn't make it the kind of order that gives them the right to detain Jeanette and to try to deport her from the country. That's the case that's pending right now in the district court. When we discovered these other elements of her arrest, which is especially in the context of what's going on in the country at large, these are things that need to be added to that suit. You get one shot at this. I can't try this one and then come back next Tuesday and try a different one. Nobody's particularly happy that having to take the time to develop the case more fully means that Jeanette, unfortunately, is still going to be in detention. But we are very grateful in this case that we got an order from this judge saying that Jeanette cannot be removed from the state of Colorado or her jurisdiction and cannot be removed from the United States while these issues are being reviewed. We're expecting to have updates on this within the next week or 10 days. It may take the government until the end of the month before they can file a response. Or maybe it goes faster. But we are going through a process. Jeanette's getting part of her day in court. But what we're really looking for here is that she is entitled to that very, very small due process that is allowed to any other non-citizen going through this process. That she's allowed to bring her case in front of the immigration court, present her defenses, and see if somebody will, looking at the equities of her case, looking at her extraordinary career as an activist, looking at how long she's been here, looking at her family, looking at this support from the community she has, and determine that despite having come into the country unlawfully, that she should be allowed to stay as a permanent resident. That's the law. That's been our law for decades. This is nothing new. All we're arguing for is that Jeanette gets the day in court that she is entitled to. Questions?
Laura, to that point, you sort of answered this a little bit, but I'm curious, like at this point, under our current immigration system, does she have a pathway to legal permanent residency? And does that matter in these removal proceedings?
At this point in time, I don't believe ICE really cares whether Jeanette would have a pathway to permanent residence if she were allowed to go through the normal immigration court process. As far as they're concerned, they have the right piece of paper that allows them to detain her and deport her. And that's the argument we have right now. We can't even reach those issues. The judge in this case is looking at one thing and one thing only. Is her detention unlawful? If I wave around a draft copy of an order that has not been executed correctly, if I just say, you know, when you're in the office, we all have this discussion about whether we should or should not deport you, and I'm sure there's a paper somewhere, or you knew this was all happening, so, oh, by the way, 12 years after the fact, we're going to pick you up and try to rush you out of the country before you can assert your rights? No. That's where we're right now. We're arguing about whether she gets to have her day in court.
The comments that were made that she was detained at this party. Do you believe there were other attempts to get her within that time frame?
I think you'll have to ask ICE on that.
You mentioned those comments and then other elements to build that second part of the case, First Amendment argument. What other elements have come forward yet, other than what was said during the actual arrest that made you
I think, like a lot of people, for my mental health, I try to stay off of social media. But I think any of you, if you're willing to dip your toes into that, can find plenty of comments from people who are clearly showing that the reason to target this individual had to do with her being an activist. Because really, why else would we be showing pictures from an official ICE account of a middle-aged mother of 4 shackled and being detained in a parking lot? Depending on whose numbers you listen to, there's between 12 and 20 million people in this country who are in almost identical situations. There's plenty of people out there that if the government was actually doing what it said it was doing, going after the bad guys, they could do that. But this is part of the case that has to get developed over the next 10 days or so when we present it, and then over the course of the litigation.
That tweet is part of it, is one of the examples that you're talking about.
I would think that's pretty good evidence.
Can you tell us, where was she in the process of applying for legal immigration at the time? Has she been working on that recently? Because, of course, as you hear social media and everyone, why isn't she applying for? Where was she in that process?
And nobody wants to stay here long enough for me to answer that. Our immigration laws are incredibly complex, and they don't actually function the way you think they would. Good, decent people with families and good histories that are contributing to our communities can be completely foreclosed from being able to get status because, for example, they left the country because their mother was dying. Jeanette's case literally has been stuck in limbo for about a dozen years. From the time she came back in 2013, this agency knew what the case posture was. They had copies of all of the relevant documents. We're still a little bit baffled why they didn't just fix it back then when they could have. But that's not my role. As her attorney, we're looking at whether or not the government has the legal authority to detain her and to attempt to remove her. And while she's in that process, waiting for something to happen, there literally is this continuing question: to whom would you apply? The fact that she left the country, literally the mere fact that she left the country to see her dying mother, is one of the major reasons why none of her children can sponsor her. They're US citizens. This system doesn't make sense. There is a reason why we have so many people in this country that don't have status. And it's not because they're freeloaders. It's not because they're taking advantage of the situation. It's because we don't have a simple path from A to B. We actually make it difficult, almost impossible, to get from A to B.
What sort of access is ICE allowing Jeanette to have to visit with you?
I would let the family speak to that. Visitation is pretty limited, only certain days a week, certain hours. We've had difficulties which, to be honest, I don't think are deliberate. It's just a matter of this system is not geared towards free and fair access. This is a for-profit prison. It is chronically understaffed. It is not unusual for someone to wait for an hour and 45 minutes to have a legal visit, and then to be told 30 minutes later, sorry, your visit is up because we need the room for something else. This is part of the reality of representing people in detention. Our detention centers are designed for extremely short stays, and nobody has a short stay. You probably have access to more programs, more entertainment, more educational programs if you're a criminal and you're actually serving a prison sentence than if you're someone in immigration detention. They're not great places to be. They're extremely stressful. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for being here. That'll be all. If you have additional questions, you can find us after, but I appreciate y'all being here. And it sounds like some of you had to catch the 6 o'clock news. So thanks everyone. Thank you guys so much for being here.
For continuing coverage, visit cbscolorado.com.